Hey everyone, Tony Bonvecchio from the Strength House. Today I'm going to talk about how to create hamstring tension during the deadlift. Now, a complaint that we get from a lot of lifters is I can't feel my hamstrings when I deadlift, or if we tell somebody to create hamstring tension, they simply don't know how. Now, I'm going to show you how to do that, but first of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about what the hamstrings do specific to the deadlift. Now, your hamstrings are on the back of your legs here, and they do two main things. So they flex the knee like this, and this is what most people think of as far as hamstrings is like a leg curl, but they also extend your hip. So that means that they assist in standing back up to an upright position like this. So to create hamstring tension, we have to lengthen or stretch our hamstrings. Now, how do you stretch your hamstrings? Most people think laying on your back and lifting your legs up, but if you're standing up, that means bending over is going to lengthen my hamstrings and stretch my hamstrings here and put them on tension. Now, obviously, we don't just want to reach down and touch our toes, but we want to strategically lengthen our hamstrings so that we can get to the bar in a good position and also get the bar to come off the ground as soon as we try to lift it up without letting our hips pop up and our back round. So, a couple of things that are going to go into play here to create hamstring tension. The first of all is the proper footwear, or in some cases, no footwear at all. So you can see here, I've got no shoes on. You either want to go with no shoes or a flat shoe, such as like a Chuck Taylor or a Reebok Power shoe. The reason for that is because if we're wearing elevated heels, like in a normal running shoe or in a squat shoe or something like that, it's going to shift our weight forward onto our forefoot. It's going to be very hard to feel our hamstrings if our weight is forward like so. We want to be flat on the ground with our weight distributed evenly over our foot, and that's going to help us get to our hamstrings. So if we got the right footwear on, now we can start to talk about how we get to the bar and load up our hamstrings. So we talked before about the difference between a bottoms up and a top down approach to setting up for the deadlift. And now a lot of people will set up in what we call a bottoms up approach. So they'll just round right over into kind of a lousy position, which lets them get nice and close to the bar, and then they're going to sit down into their ready position and then lift. However, it's really hard to load up the hamstrings properly that way, and a lot of times what we'll see there is people will overcorrect their back position. So because I'm starting in a very rounded position, people will feel like they have to really sit down low to get their back flat. The problem with that is the lower that we sit, the less hamstring tension we have, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So as I bend my knees and my hips together, my hamstrings don't change length because the hamstrings cross both the hip and the knee. So as I bend my knees and my hips, my hamstrings stay at a very even length. My hamstrings are not stretched at all right here. So for that reason, a lot of times when you see people set up like that, they'll get their hips in a low position, ready to start, but as soon as they start to pull, their hips will shoot up to a position where their hamstrings are on stretch. So your body is kind of like searching for hamstring tension, and a lot of people won't tense their hamstrings until it's too late. Their butt has shot back, and now our hamstrings are tense, but they're not in a good position to move the bar, and all I'm really using is my back to move the bar. So that's not what we want. So in this case, sometimes a top-down approach is the best way to load up our hamstrings and create that tension that we're looking for. And what a top-down approach means is that instead of reaching down and grabbing the bar in a bad position and then correcting before I lift it, I simply stay tall, sit my hips back so I feel my hamstrings right from the get-go, kind of like as if I were setting up for an RDL, and sitting back, loading up those hamstrings so I really feel all that tension here, grabbing the bar from there, and then only dropping my hips low enough to get my shins to the bar. So I feel my hamstrings like crazy here, and you can actually see how the bar is starting to float off the ground because I have all that tension and they're just kind of ready to help extend my hip. So that top-down approach, so I feel my hamstrings, I grab the bar, hold that hamstring, and then lift the bar, is a great way to help understand where your hips should be and also kind of preload those hamstrings so they can assist in lifting the bar on the way up. So that's the second thing you can do to feel your hamstrings. Last of all is make sure that you're taking the slack out of the bar properly to avoid mistake number 2 that we talked about, dropping the hips too low. So if I've gone through all this work to load up my hammies with a top-down approach, but then if I grab the bar and I sit too low, I've given up all that hamstring tension that I've worked to build. So, top-down approach, load the hamstrings, and then as soon as I grab the bar, I need to tension that bar with my lats. So I start to pre-bend that bar, and you can kind of hear the click as I take that slack out of the bar. But what that's gonna help me do is not drop my hips too low, but simply keep that tension so that once my shins hit the bar, I'm ready to go. So that tension there into the bar, plus the tension in my hamstrings, makes that bar almost float off the ground to avoid the hips shooting back as I initiate the lift. So if you're having a hard time feeling your hamstrings, 3 things that you want to look at. Proper footwear, using a top-down approach to get to the bar, and taking the slack out of the bar so you can keep that hamstring tension that you've worked so hard to build.